Welcome back. We just finished a video on the Trade tab. Trade tab was relatively simple. Today's tab, we're going to go to Construction. Now, Construction, as you'll notice, it says we have 9 currently utilized out of our 20. And it says we have 11 available for construction. And when we were on the Trade tab, it said we had 11 available for trade. As it happens, we have 11 available for either. We could put all 11 in construction, we could put all 11 in trade, we could have it mix and match, however we want to do it. So this says that we have 9 of 20, so we have 20 of our own. It says if anybody was trading with us, we would have from trade showing up there. It would also show how much we own. So if we were trading our steel to another country, for instance, and they were taking 8 of our steel from us, we would have a 1 in the from trade. So we would actually have 21, and it would show, 9 and 21. Now this has some math in it. As you'll notice, the construction speed is at plus 5%, and that's because if we have that limited exports policy, which is back over here. There's our limited exports, and as you notice it says construction speed plus 5. If we had this tech from the tech video, as you recall earlier, and we went over and took this one and finished this tech also gives us a plus 10% once we have it. So on this tab here, it would suddenly go plus 10, and it would show 5 from limited exports and 10 from construction 1. So, things incrementally increase our construction rate. Now, consumer goods. Consumer goods are based on your economy law, which is back over here. Consumer goods factory is 25%. Sometimes you'll have a national spirit that may affect it. The United States, for example, has the Great Depression, and Canada has the Great Depression, which adds like 30% or 25% to the consumer goods value for them. But when we get back over here, there's a calculation that's done. So it looks at and goes, okay, how many out of our 50 factories that we have, how many of them are not naval dockyards? So it looks at just the civilian factories and the military factories and tallies them up, and it says, okay, we got 39. And as you'll notice that it says civilian and military factories 39. And then based on our partial mobilization rate of 25%, that is our percentage of civilian and military factories that we have to dedicate to consumer goods. So approximately 1/4 of 39 is 9.75. It drops the fractions down, which is nice. That's kind of in our favor. So what that means is that 9.75 becomes 9. So we need 9 factories for consumer goods. So 9 of our civilian factories get put towards that. Now, because we have 20, we still have 11 that are available. So if we go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to build a civilian factory and I want to build it on some place, it shows all the places we can build it, and the infrastructure affects how fast it gets built. So if you build it in a place that's got 100%, it'll be built fastest there. 80% is almost as fast, 60% not so fast. When you're getting down to 20%, it's going to take you a really long time to build in that place. So I'm just going to, pick here and say I want to build one there. And you'll notice that each state has a certain number of slots. So Latium here has 6 slots. It currently has 5 used, and there's 1 free slot available, and I just am using the last one now to build a civilian factory. And as you'll notice, it says 11 factories are being utilized for that. If I was to take a factory away and go use it for trade, so let's say I want to go and get some trade from South Africa, when I come back over here, it's now down to 10. If somebody was to trade us a factory, this would go up, and that would also probably increase as well, because we would then have 40 factories because of the one that we're getting from trade, and this would then at 25% would be 10, so we wouldn't actually get an extra factory available to us, unfortunately. Now what can happen too is as you're building these factories, when we build this one, this factory here, when it finishes, we will now have 20, we'll have 21 factories, but we'll have 40 total factories because currently we have 39 civilian and military factories together. Once that one gets added, we'll hit 40, and our 25% is now going to mean that we need 10, so that extra factory that we just built is going to suddenly be utilized as consumer goods. So this number won't increase, it'll stay at 10. Even once this is built, we'll still have 10 available because one more is going to be needed for consumer goods. It's kind of weird, but it's basically this math of working it out. So as we build more civilian or military factories, more of our civilian factories are going to need to be dedicated to consumer goods. If you just build military factories, you're going to notice this number gets smaller and smaller and smaller over time. And as you build civilian factories, this number gets bigger, but not every single time. Like if you're at 25%, basically every fourth one you build won't increase the number because it's going to consumer goods instead. And it's also worth it to note that if you were to get some of the national focuses here that give you more factories, they're also going to count as factories you have, and they're going to increase the amount of factories that you're going to need to spend on consumer goods. So it does have an effect on this tab. Now, there's a lot of other things on this tab as well. That's the primary thing to know, though, is to understand that this math here is saying, okay, this is how many civilian factories you got. You've got, let's go back over here and free this one up first. This guy, turn this one off. Go back over to this one. So we've got 20 factories. 9 of them are currently being used for consumer goods, and it shows that nothing's being traded. So we've got 11 that are available. So when we go and build a military factory here in Latium, we have 11 factories that are being used to build it. Now, you can use the X to get rid of it if you don't want to build it. In a place like this one, you can click once and click again to get a second one, and click a third time. You'll notice it turns blue when it's capped out. So 5 plus 3 is 8. You can't build any more in there. We could bring that down, and we could add and between the two of them, 5 plus 3, there's 2 in Tuscany and 1. So it shows that it's capped out. If we try and click more, it won't let us, but it will let us build more elsewhere, right? Now, if you want to just go ahead and mass everything and say, hey, I want nothing but military factories in these free 7 spots, you can hold down the Shift key and select military factories and hold down Shift and click, and boom, it goes 1 plus 7 and suddenly puts it. You can also slide these around and queue them up differently. So what will happen is the first 15 civilian factories that you have available get assigned to the first item in the queue. And if you have more than 15 factories, any surplus then get assigned to the next item in the queue. So 15 will be working on this, and let's say you have 17 free factories, 2 will be working on this, 15 will be working on that. As you get more and more factories available, this one may get to 30, and when you get to like 31, then you'll have 15, 15, and 1. When you get to 35, you'll have 15, 15, and 5. When you get to 45, you'll have 15, 15, and 15. When you get to 46, it'll suddenly become available with a 1 for this one. So it allows you to work on more things for every 15 factories you have, civilian factories. Military factories are used to build military goods. Civilian factories are used to build basically everything else. Now, everything else gets put in the same queue. So your military factories are in here, your civilian factories. If you want to build your civilian factories first, you can do that. You can, hey, I want these civilian factories built first, and I want the places with 80% building them first. So we'll do that, and not this 60 here in Abruzzo. So we'll put him last because he's going to be the slowest. We want to get these other 2 up and running first at the 80% speed, right? So that's 80% infrastructure versus 60%. So this one won't build as quickly. Green is better than the yellow, and it's red over here. There's no infrastructure. It's hard to build factories and things like that when there's no roads or no running water or things in those areas. So now over on the right hand side, it shows all the things that you can build. Infrastructure. If we want to build this infrastructure up here, we can click that and we can go shift and boom, we can now do Istria build 4 levels. So it'll go 20, 40, 60, 80, and it'll build all 4 levels to level 5. Now that's going to take a long time to build. If you actually put your mouse over top of it, it will show you. If we put it down at the bottom here and have 11 factories, it tells us building infrastructure level 2 in Istria, 3 levels of infrastructure in queue for construction, days until next building, 87. Days until all constructions complete, 348. So it's going to take 3 months for this infrastructure to get completed. And then it also shows you that the fuel capacity will increase for that state by plus 1.5, which is good because it means that you've got more fuel capacity in your country overall. And then, each one, higher infrastructure allows your troops to move through your places faster. It allows them to transport supply and things through because there's better roads and stuff available. So that, got roads that go off into the mountains. So when your troops are in the mountains, they can get supplies easier with higher infrastructure. So that's what infrastructure does. It also affects how, quickly things can be constructed in those areas. So for instance, when we look at this one, if we look at Tuscany now, and this one, it's going to take 102 days until this one gets built. Does it give me a breakdown? It doesn't seem to here. There's usually a place, oh, here it is. Now it'll show us that next complete at 1 in the morning on May the 22nd, 1936. It is 1% completed. There's 207 construction already done on it out of 10,800 that it takes to build a factory. The base factory output is 5. The construction speed here is 103.95 because we have 11 factories, each pumping up 55. And then we have an infrastructure limited exports bonus of 5%. And then we have an extra 80% from our infrastructure being 80%. So we have an 85% increase above our base of 55. So 55 times 1.85 is 103.95. So that's how much we'll get every day added on to the civilian factory total. So it'll go 311, and then it'll go up, and it'll go up, and it'll go up, and it'll just keep going up, as the clock advances, right? So that's what that does. Now we can build air bases. If we need to build air bases for our units, to our fighters to fly, each state can have one air base. And you can increase it to the various levels. So if you want to improve an air base, you can do that. You can go and pick, I want to improve the air base here, and I want to improve it all the way to max. So 2 levels brings it up to max. And if we put it at first, it'll take us, it'll be done on February 24th. And it shows us that it, 103.95 is the amount of construction speed because it's being built here in this place. It's 80%. If we tried to build an airbase over here in Istria and compare it, now let's look at the numbers here. 5% times 55, but it's only 1.2, so it's 1.25, so we only get 69.3. So that infrastructure is really making it slow building it there. So when you're building, you're going to want to build in places that have higher values of infrastructure, unless you're building infrastructure, in which case, you're just building infrastructure. It doesn't matter where you build it, but you want to bring up places, obviously. Air anti-air, if you're having problems with bombers flying over and strategic bombing you, you can build up to 5 levels of anti-air in each of your provinces. If you have radar tech developed, you can build radar stations. This is the military factories. There's your civilian factories. If you want to build a naval dockyard to build more ships, you can do that. If you want to build a synthetic refinery, if you've got the tech, you can do that to get oil. This is a fuel silo, which basically will add 100% capacity to the state that it's in, I think, or maybe it could be to the whole country. Rocket site, if you've got rockets tech developed, you can build a rocket site, and then you can use the rockets to attack other provinces and do strategic bombardment of them. Nuclear reactor, you can build a nuclear reactor if you've got the tech. You can convert one to the other. So in this one we have convert one military factory to a civilian factory, or we can convert one civilian factory to a military factory. So currently we have 7 civilian factories here and 1 military factory, and so on and so forth, right? And it allows you to switch them back and forth. So you can do that if you want. Some countries it's a good idea, but generally for Italy, not such a good plan. Supply hubs. This is the supply hub. The way supply works, your units pull supply from the nearest hub to them. So if you've got ground troops over here, they're going to pull from this hub. They may be able to pull from this hub too. If this one's capacity, they may be able to pull some from there to split the load. So that can happen. Now, where these supply hubs get their supply from is from the capital. This hexagonal one here is the capital, and it will send supply through the railroad network to the hub. If that railroad network is missing, it can send it by sea. So they can send it by sea through port over that way. It can also send it down the river if there's a river. They can move it from here to here. If the railways got blown up for some reason, they can still ship it by the sea, like down the rivers to them, and get it to the other ones that way. It's not as efficient, but it is another way of getting the supply through. These routes are limitations on how many trains can go through these routes. So for instance, from here to here, it's a 2 ranking, and then it's a 1, and then from here it's a 2. So if Italy wanted to supply up to here, it's bottlenecked for this section in between here, because this is a 1. I mean, they may be able to find another way around, but that doesn't look like it. There's a 1 there, there's a 1 there. No matter how they go, these 2s are still hamstrung by the fact that there's 1s. So what you can do is you can actually increase these railways just by clicking on them. And you'll notice that the railway icons get added. It'll put them in here. And if you want, you can hit this button to move them up the category. If you hit shift when you click it, it'll move it right to the top. Or shift, click it to the bottom. And this allows us to go ahead and suddenly have a 2-level railway all the way up to the front. So if we're planning on going to war with France and need to supply the front really well, we can do that. So that's what supply hubs do. You can build a whole new supply hub if you want. Like if you feel you have a need for a supply hub, right here, you can go ahead and build one. It takes a really long time. Like their cost is like 20,000 units of production. In comparison, it's only like 10,800 for a civilian factory, and a military factory is only 7,200. So it's basically the equivalent of like 3 military factories to build a supply hub. And you want to make sure if you're going to build it in a place that you're going to really need it. So, and you're going to want to link it as well with rail or with a port, because these ones, as you'll notice, have ports connecting them, so they're getting their supply by port. But you could build a railway to connect them up that way as well and get supply. Then it could come in through here and then travel down the rail over to there, or it could just travel straight over. But it can matter if there's subs that are intercepting the convoys and doing things. Railways, you can build railways. Like we can go ahead and go, let's start building a railway from here from Tripoli, and you can just start clicking, zoom out and cruise along. Whoop. Look, and we just built a route from this one to this one, and you can see it's 14 squares. It's going to take a while to build it. If we put it up at the top, let's see how long. It would be finished on, the first link would be done on April 11th. If we put it over here, it actually tells us time for completion 52 days, railways needed for completion 14. So it's going to take a while to build that. And you'll notice that's a level 1 railway. If we wanted, we could make it a level 2, and then suddenly it's now 28 because we have to go, make 2 railway tracks all the way along. And we could even go up to 3 or 4 or 5. And, suddenly progressively it goes up to 70, and now it's going to take 484 days to build that railway. And of course, we're having to do it in the infrastructure of 40%, 40%, and 40%. Whereas if we were building it, the railway through here, it would take even longer because this is 20% through those areas. You can also build naval bases. So if we wanted to build a naval base right there, we could. And we could have ships stop there, and naval bases can be used for supply as well, so it's a cheap way of getting a supply depot if you need it. Rather than spending 20,000, you could just spend 5,000 and get a naval base. You can build forts. If you want to build a border, a fort line, you can go ahead and build a level 4 fort on the border, so that anytime they attack against you, your units that are in these spaces will have a defense buff because these places are there. If you want to have a coastal fort, that will protect. Now this will only affect against ground attacks from other places. If they come by sea, it won't protect against that. But if we do this one instead and put in coastal forts, that will protect against attack by sea, and the regular one will protect against attacks by ground. So that's what that all does. These are all of the different things there. You can minimize that and maximize it. I'm not sure why that's there, but it's a feature. And essentially that's the gist of this tab. The tricky part, like I say, is trying to understand the math of how consumer goods work, because you want to have as low a consumer goods rate as possible, because essentially consumer goods are just things that are being used to keep your people happy. And if you have certain penalties, that they can cause you to have a higher consumer goods ratio. For example, when we went to those decisions, there was one, was it promises of peace? Nope. Improve worker conditions. So if we do this one, you'll notice that consumer goods factories gets increased by 5%. So if we were to take this for 180 days, our consumer goods rank would actually be 5% higher. So instead of 25%, it would be 30%. And we would have to use 30% of our 39 factories, so basically about 13 of them would have to be dedicated, or 12 of them would have to be dedicated to consumer goods. So, that's the tricky part about that, is that little bit of math in figuring out that, and recognizing how many you've got available. You'll get a notification once all of these are emptied out, and there's a cancel all the control clicks, so I'll do control click, and they're all gone. If I have, let's put one there. Build a military factory in Calabria. Not the best idea, 60%, so it's going to take longer. May 6th, whereas if I build it in Latium and put that one there, This one will be available April 28th. So you notice there's about a week's difference in time. This one will be built slightly faster than this one, and that little bit of incremental production that you'll get is worthwhile. So that's why it's important to note what the infrastructure level is in the places. Some techs will also increase the amount of building slots that you have available to you in the provinces. Another thing is from the screen itself, you can actually click on the province and it'll show you it's level 4 of 5, 8 of 10 in airbase, 0 of 5 in anti-air, none for radar stations. It's level 2 for railways, and it's showing you that of its slots, it's currently building a military one. It has a military one existing, and it has 4 civilian factories, and you can actually click on these to do a conversion. Click to convert to military factory, and then it'll actually add it to the list here. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat. Just like Windows, you can do things 10 different ways. These ones are all locked up. There's ways to unlock them. There's other information in here. It tells who the owner is. It says, hey, this is Italy's state, and it's an Italian core state. Whereas if we go to Zera, this is Italy state, they're the owner, but it's an occupied state. It also notices that Yugoslavia has a claim on it as a core, and Croatia also has a claim on it as a core. That's how many people are there. There's 18,000 civilian population that are recruitable. Resistance is 12%. Compliance is 3%. And this is telling us that we have this guy as our doing garrison duty. And you'll notice that there's no free slots available in this province. It has no borders or anything. It does have a port. It's a level 1 of 10 port. And it does have a supply hub, but level 0. The only supply it has is from being a port. So I'll leave you here today with that to think about and process, because that's probably a fair amount of information to take in. But that's the production tab for you, or sorry, construction tab. And I'll let you go.